On today's episode of the DeRaud-Messinger Show, we discuss Texas's toughest games in the 2023 season, Dylan. Shocker, we don't actually have all of the same games here. I know you guys think we're a brain trust, but sometimes the brain does not trust Dylan. But the first game, Dylan, is pretty obvious if you don't have the same game as we do. I can't really blame you in terms of what's at stake because this game might not be important, Dylan, in the conference title picture, but as many people are hyping up the Longhorns to be this season, if they don't win this game, or at least put a challenge up, it might not look good for that ultimate title chase that everyone is hoping that Texas is destined for in 2023. And that would be, Dylan, at Alabama, September 9th.
Yeah, so this is a tough one. And the craziest part about this, Devon, is you can almost talk yourself into like Texas having a chance or this Alabama team isn't as good as they were last year, obviously, because they don't have a Heisman winner in Bryce Young there, and as well as Jahmyr Gibbs back there in the backfield, both of them going on
Your
to the
boy.
NFL. So, yes, my boy, it was a great value pick. I'll say that till I die. But with Alabama, obviously, new situation with Jalen Milroe, likely to start the season with Bryce Young gone, like we talked about. His first career start last season, Devin, beat A&M, which is a great thing to hold over the Aggies' heads in that aspect. Believe he went for 12 and 19 passing with 100 or so yards, but he does have a good ability with his legs to make things happen. And then they have Jason McClellan, who was the backup running back last year, starting for them. So the talent is still there. Obviously, there's question marks with can Milroe run this offense. But again, and also question marks with the receiving core. But defensively, Devin, they're always going to be great. They're number 2 in ESPN's power rankings. This is the obvious choice, especially with Texas missing the chance to beat them last year. And then now they're having to go into Tuscaloosa, which is a whole nother beast. But luckily enough, with this scheduling, if they were to lose this game close or by a touchdown or so, it's not the end of the world as long as they bounce back and win the critical games that we'll talk about later.
Exactly, and you mentioned Milroe. A lot of Texas fans will remember that Milroe was once committed to Texas. Of course, that didn't work out. Both sides, I think, Dylan probably, ended up winning, though, for their own different reasons. Texas getting their own guys, and Milroe getting the chance at Alabama. Dylan, it is obvious to mention that Texas did almost win last year. There were some controversial calls towards the end of that game. I won't comment on, for the sake of our sanity.
Shades of Marcel Darius, or
What? There were some things in that game, but I think Texas does have the shot. I mean, it is a preseason. We won't really know until, they put on the pads and everything. But they did almost beat Alabama last year. Of course, this year is at Alabama. But they do have some shakeups on their roster, as Dylan mentioned. Nick Saban, though, is still on that sideline, Dylan. I mean, I don't know if people remember that, but he's still there. But I think this, last year Texas didn't get a lot of credit beforehand. I remember DeMarvion Overshown was talking about at least potentially beating Alabama, and then Alabama Twitter went crazy and was attacking him on my timeline. Yeah, it was a war zone. But all I'm saying, they have a chance in this game, at least from what we see before the season even starts. Of course, can't see too much yet. But this game, if they win, if they keep it close, it's at least a confidence booster and gives them a title shot at the end of the day if they can keep everything else, a clean sheet. But Dylan, game number 2, what are you feeling here?
well, so there's an obvious answer. You could maybe say another team should be here, but just given the talent in the recruiting class, and you forget about last year, I got to go with Oklahoma here. Obviously, Texas is going to play them in the Red River rivalry game on October 7th. They're number 12 in ESPN's power rankings, Devin. They're above Longhorns, who are sitting at number 15. But again, Oklahoma, they're coming off a 6-7 season in which they also got shellacked by Texas and then lost to Florida State in a bowl game to end the season to finish below 500. So not ideal for Brent Venables in his first year, but he is a hell of a recruiter. He's pulled in a top 4 class behind Texas, who's sitting at number 3 in the 2023 class, according to 24/7 Sports. But they did land our 2 boys, Devin, Peyton Bowen out of Dengar, as well as Jackson Arnold, who was who was at the helm for Dengar last year, who we ranted and raved about. So during their run in the playoffs, but again, Dylan Gabriel's coming back. after his injury-riddled season. When he's healthy, he looks really good.
Yeah,
So this
that's
is
the
still a
thing.
team that I would be very hesitant, especially with Venables being such a defensive-minded head coach. He knows how to run his stuff. So after a year of getting situated, this is going to be a new Oklahoma team. I would not expect the same result this year for Texas.
Yeah, I think it's no shocker that I also have Oklahoma at number 2. Now, as Dylan's saying, some people might disagree or come up with their own solutions here. I mean, that's completely fine. They were not hot last year, which, as Dylan mentioned, is quite obvious. And Dylan, Venables and Gabriel, I think, were playing some pregame shenanigans before the
Mhm.
Red River game last season, making it seem like he maybe was going to give it a go, but ended up not being the case. And of course, Oklahoma, I don't know, Dylan, if it ultimately ended up being the third string quarterback, but it was not pretty. They definitely, I think, pulled the plug on their guy at least part way through the game.
Yeah.
But that's not gonna be the same Oklahoma team we'll see this season. Gabriel's health, of course, is a big deal here. When he's healthy, he's one of the best passers without a doubt in the Big 12. I'm gonna give Oklahoma the benefit of the doubt, and it's a neutral site game, Dylan. Not in Austin, of course, and newly renamed the Red River rivalry, as Dylan said, versus the showdown or the shootout. I know people like shootout a lot. I think the triple R has been my personal favorite throughout the years, and I'm glad they returned to that. But that's just the
I just
side.
can't pronounce it very well. That's the only problem.
It's always tough. It just doesn't roll off the tongue. But
No,
I
no.
love alliteration though. Game number 3, Dylan. Who do you got?
Yeah, so Devin, this is a new formed bond. We're trauma bonding over this team, given how I would always talk crap about Texas losing to them. And then I kind of had to eat my own words in the college football playoff semifinal as Michigan lost to TCU in a blowout. So no surprise, I've got TCU here. Texas is going to be going to Fort Worth November 11th, and I can tell you firsthand, Fort Worth is always ready for when the Longhorns come into town to play them.
Without a doubt.
So yeah, I
The
mean,
college
but
bars are open and
yeah, they're raring to go. The economy is very well situated after that game. But again, they're coming off that blowout loss where you really saw the talent discrepancy between Georgia and TCU. But they are returning their top 3 tacklers on the defensive side with linebackers Johnny Hodges, Jamoy Hodge, and then safety Mark Perry. But Devin, most importantly, they're losing two or three big parts of their offense from last year in Max Duggan and Quentin Johnson, who went off to the Chargers. And then Chandler Morris is coming back to start at quarterback after losing his job to Max Duggan. So we'll have to see how that situation plays out. But with Sonny Dykes, being the head coach now, Devin, I don't see TCU being a one-hit wonder. I still see them being a very competitive team, even with losing major portions of their team last year. So TCU is still not a team I would write off in any sense of the word.
no, exactly. Like you said, they're very well coached. And the one thing that they did last year, the game in Austin, Dylan, was not sexy. Let's be honest. It was
No.
quite ugly for both teams. But I'm only saying that because TCU showed last year that they're going to win games regardless of how it looks. Some of those games, were eye-popping offensive style and fashion, and then against UT in Austin, low scoring, more of a I wouldn't even say defensive slugfest because even that I think would be putting the offenses.
Yeah.
The offenses of that game are pretty bad, but the punter, I know Longhorns fans might get
Oh,
triggered, but the punter did his work for TCU.
if you like field position, that was the game for you.
That was the game. Now, I would agree that this is a tough game. I'm gonna save this for just another second because, as you said, Duggan and Johnson aren't there. Johnson, so I agree it's going to be a tough one. But at this spot at number 3, I have Kansas State. Now Dylan might be shocking to hear, especially with our boy Deuce not being there anymore at running back. Deuce Vaughn, the K State great, the next
Mm.
version of Darren Sproles in the Little Apple. He's not there, of course. Will Howard looks like he's getting the reins this year at quarterback again. Finally, he filled in a little bit last season after some injuries. But K State second on the Big 12 preseason poll, so it's going to be a challenge there. They do got returners, but on the bright side for Texas fans, this game will be in Austin at home. And then Dylan, I'm just going to move on here to the game number 4, and I'll pick up right here. I have TCU. That's November 11th in Fort Worth. And I'm not going to repeat too much what Dylan said because he did it so eloquently, like he always does. Maybe the best compliment I've ever given this man. But they do return a lot of talent, especially on defense. It is in Fort Worth, as Dylan was saying. The crowd gets rowdy for that. It's the one game that I think everyone wakes up that day without the need for the alarm clock in
Are
Fort
you
Worth.
pulling that? Are you pulling that crowd card right now, Devon? Is
I
that what you're
am.
pulling?
They're
Okay.
they're waking up. No alarm clock needed for that one.
Mm.
We talked about it. That's my fourth toughest game on Texas' schedule. What do you have?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, the talent is still there for both teams. I can't say it has a ton of talent as well. I wouldn't say TCU is head and shoulders above them in any aspect, but it's that going into Fort Worth, November 11th, when you're kind of in that home stretch of the season, and this will be coming off the game against Kansas State, right? So this will be the next week after. So there's just certain situations in this scenario where it's going to be tough for Texas playing against TCU. That's why I have TCU above Kansas State. But with Kansas State, Devin, you got Will Howard taking over after Adrian Martinez, 12th year in college football. So interesting to see how Howard does. But he does have a great arm. It was noticeably different when he was in the game. Instead of Martinez, the throws that he was able to make. So this isn't, you could almost say this is an upgrade for them at the quarterback position, especially with Howard having more experience coming off last year. But, Devin, they are losing your boy, Deuce Vaughn, at running back, which is a major loss. He'll go on to do great things for the Cowboys. But, again, this is a big part of their offense, running the ball and passing the ball, right? He was very good in the passing game. So that's a big loss offensively. And then on the defensive side, I'm going to probably just destroy this name, Devin, but they're losing Felix Duque-Uzama, right, at defensive end.
Yep.
Drafted in the first round. And then they're also losing cornerback Julian Brents, who was seemingly all over the field last season at cornerback. So they're losing key players on that defensive side. And, I like TCU's defense over them and just where the kind of schedule lines up for them this year.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And it's going to be a tough 2 games for those Longhorns, especially Dylan. There's going to be some sort of trap games. I wouldn't say those 2 are trap games, but they might not be as prepared, of course, as they are against Alabama. Of course, coaches wouldn't say that. But we got challenger number 5, Dylan. I'll take this one. We have different picks here, guys. Yet again, we're here to surprise you. This is first.
There's some biases here, though. This is like a bias area for us.
Definitely some bias. I'm going November 24th versus Texas Tech. Now, of course, we talk about it every time we talk about Tech. We have the flashbacks of Crabtree, but you don't have to go that far back to see some upsets from those Red Raiders. Unfortunately for the Longhorns fans watching, and Dylan, speaking of last season's results, last year Texas did lose to the Red Raiders. Of course, the quarterback picture was a little bit different at that time thanks to Quinn Ewers' injury. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. But Joey McGuire, talking about recruiting, has been on that recruiting trail. Of course, it won't compare in terms of rankings to a Texas or an Oklahoma. But for a Red Raiders program that hasn't really gotten too much attraction on that front lately, it has picked up quite considerably. And they still got pieces. They got Tyler Shuck and Bradley. I was gonna say Brantley. That's not right. Jaron Bradley, who actually, Dylan, I think is on the first team Big 12 all preseason list, and he did a great job last season. There are a lot of teams, though, that could fill in on this number 5 slot, Dylan, so I'm not mad at you for choosing otherwise. I think Tech fans will swarm, but, go ahead.
Well, I don't mean this as, disrespect, but I have, Texas Tech wasn't even a thought for me at number 5 when I was thinking of who to put there. I have Baylor, right? And, Devin, I'm going to speak just in regards to the Tech and Baylor discussion. I was at the game in Lubbock when Baylor came into town and played Texas Tech, visiting my brother. And let's just say it was one of the worst performances I've seen from Tech. They could not move the ball. When they would get close, they'd end up having to kick a field goal or just not converting on 4th down just because of bad passes, right? So that's where, when I'm talking about bias, it kind of comes into play. And again, I like Dave Aranda as a head coach, and I like his pedigree coming from LSU as a defensive coordinator.
You're not the only one. Yeah, Aranda's great.
Yeah, I really like what he does, right? But surprisingly, this defense did allow 26.8 points per game last season for Baylor. So that's something to write home about. I wouldn't say Baylor had a better season than Tech or anything really, but again, Blake Shapen is coming in off of a quarterback competition in camp again, but look to improve off of last season. They still have running back Richard Reese returning, Devon, after setting a program record. As a freshman, I believe he had around 900 yards rushing. So he's got another year of experience under his belt and will be a key focal point for this offense. But they're also losing a ton of starters on the offensive line, as well as defensively. They've only got one returning starter in safety, Devon Lemire. So there's a lot of question marks for Baylor, but I like their head coach. I also like their situation. It's going to be at McLean Stadium in Waco, September 23rd. So this is going to be a road game for Texas. And just like you talking about TCU, Waco kids are going to be getting out of bed for this game, and they'll be ready for it, right? They'll have been waiting all of September for this game.
100%.
So
we have
that's why I really like this.
We have our Baylor friends. We know that they look forward to this game.
You've got your fair weather fans. They'll hit you up after they lose or win, right?
Yeah, just like your brothers. But honorable mentions. Dylan's talked about Baylor. Baylor didn't make my top 5, but my first honorable mention are those Baylor Bears.
Exactly.
We're not going to go too quick or too slow with these mentions, but Dave Aranda, Richard Reese, Week 4 game at Baylor, as Dylan said. The student section is definitely alive and well for that game, to say the very least. So I have them, and then I have November 18th at Iowa State. Any at Iowa State game should scare you, even, regardless of what they are doing on the field. For some reason, they just, get revived. There's some sort of spirit goes through Ames, Iowa, and they start looking like, just, I don't know, monsters doing it. Texas always loses any sort of superpower they have going into that game. But what are you feeling here? Honorable mention.
Yeah, my first honorable mention, and to add some context, Devin, this will be November 18th. So this is going to be a stretch in which Kansas State comes into town, then they go up to Fort Worth, and then they go up to Ames, Iowa, which this is towards the latter end, I believe, like the 11th game of the season. This will more than likely be a night game, and depending on how Iowa State's looked all year, it's still going to
be a blackout, probably.
Probably a blackout. There's something about those black uniforms. Also, when they throw in some white to that too, where they change it up, and just being in the dark and going into Ames, for me, I do not like that for any team. So
if they were a good team, that would be game number 1 here, I think.
Exactly, and they went 4-8, I believe, last year, but they were competitive.
Yeah, they got Hunter Deckers, the quarterback, who's actually quietly one of the better Big 12 quarterbacks too, and of course Matt Campbell, head coach.
Yeah,
who just hates, I think, Texas secretly, but
Well, that was the thing. You put your tinfoil hat on. He was getting a lot of calls from other universities to go other places, and then they went 4-8, and now he's going to be here again. So maybe he wants another shot. Maybe he tanks just for this moment. But I've got number 1 honorable mention. I got Iowa State, of course, and then my next one, Devin. It's a bit hit or miss. You could throw Tech in here. I'm going with Kansas. I like what Lance Leopold has done for that culture. Nothing like watching College Game Day and you got Rob Riggle showing up, right? Building up Kansas, having Bill Self show up to some games, right? So there's a newfound belief in Kansas here. Jalen Daniels is coming back. He was injured. That's why Kansas kind of fell off in the middle half of the season and the end, obviously. But with those two guys at quarterback and at head coach, there's a lot to like with that culture and kind of building it up. And Kansas has its own history with Texas with some upsets recently. So I like this one just in the sense of over Tech here at the 7th spot.
Yeah, with Jalen Daniels returning, I believe, Dylan, that he was named the Offensive Player of the Year in the preseason poll for the Big 12. So definitely no sleeper there. And they did shock Texas. I know it was a couple years ago, but they did shock them at home. That was a tough one for fans, of course. But, more importantly than our thoughts, of course, which game are you looking forward to most in 2023? Let us know down below. And have a great rest of your day.